A racist cop was arresting two innocent black teenage girls when they calmly handed him a business card. His hands started trembling when he saw the name printed in gold letters. 10 minutes later, he was begging for mercy as their powerful father walked through the door. What happened next would transform a hate-filled heart and teach an unforgettable lesson about justice and redemption. Before this emotional story begins, leave a comment letting us know which city you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for good karma. The morning sun cast long shadows across Westbrook Academy's parking lot as Officer James Mitchell watched his son Peter bounce excitedly in the back seat, clutching his superhero lunchbox. The prestigious private school loomed before them, its brick walls and ivy-covered facade speaking of old money and even older traditions. "Have a great day, buddy," James said, catching Peter's reflection in the rearview mirror. "Remember what we talked about? Be nice to everyone, okay?" "Yes, Dad." Peter grinned, revealing a missing front tooth. He scrambled out of the car, joining the stream of uniformed students heading toward the heavy oak doors. James waited until Peter disappeared inside before pulling out his phone. He dialed home, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as it rang. "Hey, Ellen," he said when his wife answered. "Just dropped Peter off. Listen, I might be late tonight. We've got that neighborhood watch meeting I need to attend." "Okay, be safe out there," Ellen replied. "I'll keep dinner warm." 20 minutes later, James was patrolling the quiet streets near Westbrook Academy when something caught his eye. Two teenage girls were walking along the sidewalk in the school's distinctive navy blazers. His jaw tightened as he slowed the patrol car. In 20 years on the force, he'd learned to trust his instincts. These girls didn't fit the usual Westbrook profile. Their skin was too dark for this neighborhood, this school. James flipped on his lights and pulled up beside them. The girls stopped walking, their expressions carefully neutral as they turned to face him. They were identical twins, both wearing the uniform perfectly pressed and polished. "ID cards, please," he barked, stepping out of his car. The twins exchanged a quick glance before reaching into their backpacks. Their movements were deliberate and calm. "Sir, we're students here," one of them said quietly. "I'm Ashley Thompson, and this is my sister Amber. We forgot our ID cards today, but our father can verify—" "You forgot?" James cut her off, stepping closer. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Or you never had them to begin with? I know your type. Think you can just waltz into any place you want. Westbrook's a prestigious school. You really expect me to believe you belong here?" The twins remained silent, their faces masks of careful composure. Even as James continued his verbal assault, their dignified silence seemed to anger him further. "Get in the car," he ordered, gesturing to his patrol vehicle. "Both of you. We're going to have a nice long chat down at the station about identity theft and trespassing." The girls complied without argument, though their shoulders were rigid with tension as they slid into the back seat. James slammed the door behind them, muttering under his breath about troublemakers and teaching them a lesson. As he started the car, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The twins sat perfectly still, their hands folded in their laps, faces forward. Their composure unnerved him. Most kids would be crying or protesting by now, but these two just sat there, dignified and silent, as if they knew something he didn't. "You're awful quiet back there," James sneered, pulling away from the curb. "Nothing to say for yourselves." Neither girl responded. They simply exchanged another of those meaningful glances that made James's skin prickle with irritation. He turned up the radio to drown out the uncomfortable silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he drove toward the station. The morning traffic parted around them, other drivers pulling aside for the police car, unaware of the injustice taking place inside. The twins' school bags sat between them on the seat, their homework and textbooks evidence of their legitimate status as students, evidence James had chosen to ignore in favor of his own racial bias. James's eyes darted to his rearview mirror, noticing a black SUV that had been following his patrol car for the past few minutes. The vehicle kept a steady distance, not too close, but definitely trailing them. His police instincts kicked in, and he straightened in his seat, preparing for potential trouble. The sudden ring of his phone cut through the tense silence. James fumbled with the device, nearly dropping it when he saw the caller ID. "Captain Matthews," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mitchell!" The captain's voice was sharp enough to make him flinch. "Where are you right now?" "I'm, bringing in 2 suspicious individuals from Westbrook Academy, sir. 2 teenage girls in Westbrook uniforms." The captain's tone grew even harder. James's stomach dropped. "Do you have any idea who those girls are, Mitchell?" The captain paused, and James could hear him taking a deep breath. "Those are Judge William Thompson's daughters, his twins." The blood drained from James's face, his hands beginning to shake on the steering wheel as the full implications hit him. Judge Thompson, one of the most powerful and respected figures in the justice system, the man who could end his career with a single phone call. "Pull over immediately," the captain ordered. "Release those girls and report directly to Judge Thompson's office. He's waiting for you." "Yes, sir. I'm really sorry," James managed to croak out before the line went dead. His hands trembled as he pulled the patrol car to the curb, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself before stepping out of the vehicle. The weight of his mistake pressed down on him like a physical force as he approached the rear door. The twins sat quietly in the back seat, their posture perfect despite the uncomfortable situation. Their matching Westbrook Academy uniforms were pristine, making James's hasty assumptions about them seem even more ridiculous now. "I, made a mistake," James said, his voice cracking slightly as he opened the door. "You're free to go." The girls exchanged a brief glance before carefully stepping out of the patrol car. Their faces remained neutral, but their eyes held a wisdom beyond their years. James shifted his weight from foot to foot, acutely aware of the black SUV that had pulled up behind his patrol car, its tinted windows concealing its occupants. What had started as a routine morning patrol had suddenly become the worst mistake of his career. And somewhere in the back of his mind, James knew this was only the beginning of his troubles. Judge William Thompson's office exuded power and authority. Dark mahogany panels lined the walls, and leather-bound law books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves. James Mitchell stood before the massive desk, his police cap clutched in trembling hands. The morning's events played on repeat in his mind as he waited, each passing second feeling like an eternity. The door opened with a soft click. Judge Thompson entered, his tall frame carrying the weight of both authority and fatherly concern. Behind him stood Captain Matthews, whose usually friendly face now wore an expression of deep disappointment. "Officer Mitchell." The judge's voice was measured, controlled. "Please, have a seat." James lowered himself into the leather chair, feeling smaller with each passing moment. Through the window behind the judge's desk, he could see the city skyline, a view he might not enjoy much longer if this went as badly as he feared. "My daughters," Judge Thompson began, his fingers steepled before him, "are honor students at Westbrook Academy. Ashley is student body president. Amber leads the debate team. They've never been in trouble a day in their lives." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Yet this morning you saw them walking to school and assumed they were criminals. Why is that, Officer Mitchell?" James shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I was just following protocol. They didn't have ID dash." "Don't." The judge's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't insult us both by pretending this was about ID cards. You saw 2 young black women in a prestigious neighborhood and made assumptions. Assumptions that could have had serious consequences." Captain Matthews stepped forward. We've reviewed your body cam footage, Mitchell. The language you used, the threats you made, they're completely unacceptable. James felt sweat beading on his forehead. Sir, I can explain. No need, Judge Thompson interrupted. Your actions this morning spoke clearly enough. He opened a folder on his desk. However, I believe in rehabilitation over punishment. Captain Matthews and I have discussed your situation at length. James held his breath, waiting for the axe to fall. You're being transferred to the 15th Precinct in Riverside, Captain Matthews announced. Effective immediately. The blood drained from James's face. Riverside, the predominantly black neighborhood on the other side of the city. But sir, that's 3 hours from here? Judge Thompson finished. Yes, it is. You'll spend 6 months there, working directly with the community you've shown such prejudice against. Consider it an education, Officer Mitchell. My family, James protested weakly. My son. We'll hopefully learn a better example from you after these 6 months, the judge said firmly. This isn't a negotiation, officer. It's this or your badge. That evening, James stood in Peter's doorway, watching as Ellen tucked their son into bed. The boy's Superman nightlight cast heroic shadows on the wall, making the moment feel even more poignant. Why do you have to go, Dad? Peter asked, his voice small and confused. James sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his son's hair. Sometimes, buddy, grown-ups need to learn important lessons. I made a mistake, and now I need to make it right. But 3 hours away? Peter's lower lip trembled. That's so far. I'll call every day, James promised, trying to keep his voice steady, and I'll be home before you know it. Just 6 months. After Peter finally drifted off to sleep, James found Ellen in the kitchen. She stood at the sink, her back to him, shoulders tense. You could fight this, she said quietly, not turning around. We could get a lawyer. And say what? James's voice was bitter. That I was just doing my job. We both know that's not true. Ellen turned, her eyes glistening. This will be hard on Peter. I know. James slumped into a kitchen chair. But maybe it's better he learns this lesson through me now. Better than repeating my mistakes later. Later that night, as James packed his bags, he found himself staring at a family photo on the dresser. It was from last summer's vacation, all 3 of them smiling on a beach, not a care in the world. His hand clenched around the shirt he was folding. The Thompson twins. This was all their fault. If they hadn't been there, walking down that street, but a small voice in his head, sounding suspiciously like his son's, whispered, they were just walking to school. James shoved the thought away, along with the shirt, into his suitcase. He might have to serve this punishment, but he didn't have to like it, and he certainly wouldn't forget who was responsible for taking him away from his family. As he zipped up the suitcase, his phone buzzed with a text from Captain Matthews. Report to Riverside Station tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. Officer King will be your partner. Don't make me regret giving you this second chance. James looked around his bedroom one last time, at the life he was being forced to leave behind. 6 months in Riverside. 6 months among them. His jaw clenched at the thought. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 6 months passed like a slow-moving glacier, each day in Riverside testing James Mitchell's patience and pride. Now, pulling into his driveway on a crisp autumn evening, the familiar sight of home sparked something dark inside him. He'd played their game, smiled at the right moments, attended their community meetings, but underneath his polite exterior, the resentment had only grown stronger. "Daddy!" Peter burst through the front door, launching himself into James's arms. The boy had grown taller, his missing tooth now replaced by a permanent one. Ellen followed more slowly, her eyes glistening with happy tears as she wrapped her arms around both of them. "Welcome home," she whispered. Later that night, after Peter was asleep, James sat in his favorite armchair, nursing a beer. The comfort of being home only intensified his anger about the circumstances that had sent him away. His thoughts turned to the Thompson twins, their silent dignity during that traffic stop 6 months ago. Those girls, he muttered, his grip tightening on the bottle. Think they're untouchable because of their father. What was that? Ellen looked up from her book on the couch. Nothing. James took another long drink, but his mind was already churning with possibilities. He needed to show those girls that actions had consequences, that they couldn't just waltz around thinking they were better than everyone else. The next morning, James sat at his desktop computer, the blue light illuminating his determined face. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard as he accessed the school database through his police credentials. Within minutes, he had pulled up the files on Ashley and Amber Thompson. Same grade as Peter, he muttered, scrolling through their information. His eyes narrowed as he read about their academic achievements and extracurricular activities. Honor roll students, student council members, community service awards. The list went on and on. James's jaw clenched. These girls had everything, privilege, status, and a powerful father to protect them, yet they had caused him 6 months of separation from his family. The thought made his blood boil. He grabbed his car keys and headed to the nearby Walmart, his mind racing with ideas. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he pushed his cart through the aisles, filling it with an assortment of items: spray paint, plastic wrap, glue, and various other supplies. Just need to teach them a lesson, he whispered to himself. Nothing too serious. Just enough to shake them up a bit. At the checkout, the young cashier smiled pleasantly. Having a party? James forced a smile. Something like that. Back in his car, James sorted through his supplies, organizing them methodically. His police training kicked in as he planned each step carefully. He knew he had to be smart about this. No direct confrontation, nothing that could be traced back to him. Just enough to make those girls understand that their actions had consequences. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. James woke up earlier than usual, his stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and unease. After a rushed breakfast, he kissed Ellen goodbye and loaded Peter into the car for school. "Dad, why are we leaving so early?" Peter asked, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Just want to beat the traffic, buddy." They arrived at the school parking lot 20 minutes before the first bell. After dropping Peter off, James didn't drive away as usual. Instead, he parked in a secluded spot behind a row of oak trees with a clear view of the student parking area. His heart began to race when he spotted the Thompson twins' silver Honda Civic pulling into the lot. The girls emerged from their car with practiced grace, both wearing matching blue sweaters that complemented their dark skin. They walked together toward the school entrance, their heads held high, completely unaware of his presence in the shadows. James waited until they disappeared inside the building, counting to 60 under his breath like he used to do during police surveillance operations. The parking lot was mostly empty, with just a few early-arriving teachers clutching travel mugs of coffee. Perfect. Moving quickly but casually, like someone checking their own vehicle, he approached the twins' car. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small knife, its blade glinting menacingly in the morning light. His hands trembled slightly as he crouched down beside the driver's side tire. The knife made a soft hissing sound as it penetrated the rubber. James moved methodically from tire to tire, making sure each one was properly punctured. Next, he pulled out a thick black marker. His hand steady now, fueled by a surge of misplaced righteousness, he wrote on the driver's side window, "Go back where you came from." He added more slurs across the other windows, his writing growing larger and more aggressive with each word. A car door slammed somewhere in the lot, the sound like a gunshot in the morning quiet. James quickly pocketed his marker and walked away at a measured pace, fighting the urge to run. Back in his car, his heart was pounding against his ribs like a trapped animal trying to escape. That'll teach them, he thought, watching from across the lot as more students began to arrive, some already pointing at the vandalized vehicle. The Thompson twins emerged from the school building that afternoon, engaged in quiet conversation about their calculus test. Their steps faltered as they approached their car, both stopping dead in their tracks at the sight before them. James watched from his hiding spot as the girls took in the damage. He'd expected tears, outbursts, or at least some display of distress. Instead, he saw two young women handling the situation with a composure that seemed beyond their years. They made several phone calls, documented the damage with photos, and waited patiently for assistance to arrive. Their maturity only served to fuel James's anger. In his mind, their calm response felt like defiance, as if they were somehow above the fear he'd tried to instill. "This isn't enough," he muttered to himself, watching as a tow truck pulled into the parking lot. "They need to learn their place." That evening, Peter wandered down the hallway toward his father's study, clutching his math homework. As he approached the partially open door, he heard his father's voice, low and angry, muttering to himself, "Get some guys from the old neighborhood. Make it look like an accident. Those Thompson girls won't know what hit them." Peter froze, his worksheet forgotten in his trembling hands. He recognized the names. Ashley and Amber Thompson were juniors who helped run the peer tutoring program. His heart started beating faster as he pieced together what his father was saying. "Dad?" Peter pushed the door open. "You can't—" James spun around in his chair, face flushing red. "Peter, what are you— How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." Peter's voice shook but held firm. "You can't hurt Ashley and Amber. They're good people." James's expression hardened. "You don't understand, son. While I was away for those 6 months, separated from you and your mother, it was because of them. They need to pay for what they put our family through." "No, Dad." Peter shook his head vigorously. "You don't understand. Those girls, they saved me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. James stared at his son, confusion replacing anger on his face. "What do you mean they saved you?" The story that followed would change everything. "They helped me, Dad." Peter's voice trembled with emotion. "Last month, when I told you about those 5th graders who were picking on me, I didn't tell you the whole story." James sat back in his chair, the anger in his face giving way to confusion. "What do you mean?" "They were pushing me around behind the gym, trying to take my lunch money." Peter wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Ashley and Amber saw it happening. They stepped in and stopped it. They didn't just make the bullies leave. They talked to them, got them to apologize. Now those kids are actually nice to me. James stared at his son, processing this revelation. "They helped you?" "They didn't even know who I was, Dad," Peter continued. "They just helped because it was the right thing to do." Before James could respond, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the study window, they could see emergency lights flashing in the street. James's police radio, still habit to carry, crackled to life. "All units. Possible kidnapping in progress at Westbrook Academy. 2 female students." James's blood ran cold. The next morning dawned crisp and clear as James pulled up to the school drop-off zone. Despite his conversation with Peter the previous night, old habits died hard, and his eyes methodically scanned the parking lot. He spotted the Thompson twins' car pulling into its usual spot, the silver sedan gleaming in the early morning sun. Suddenly, a dark van screeched to a halt beside them. James sat up straighter, his police instincts kicking in as adrenaline flooded his system. 2 men in black ski masks leaped out, moving with frightening efficiency that spoke of careful planning. The twins tried to scream, but the attackers were too quick. One man pressed cloth against their mouths while the other roughly pushed them into the van. Their school supplies scattered across the asphalt, their muffled cries echoing across the nearly empty parking lot. James's hands gripped his steering wheel, knuckles turning white as ivory. His mind raced through possibilities. He wasn't on active duty, had no weapon, no radio, no backup. The rational part of his brain told him to call 911, but something else nagged at him, a gut feeling he couldn't ignore. By the time patrol cars arrived, the van could be long gone, taking the girls with it. The van's tires squealed against the pavement as it peeled out of the parking lot. James threw his car into drive and pulled out after them, his decision made in a split second. He maintained a careful distance, not wanting to tip off the kidnappers that they were being followed. His phone lay on the passenger seat, screen dark and silent, but he couldn't risk taking his eyes off the van to make a call. Even a moment's distraction could mean losing them. The van weaved through morning traffic, taking back streets and less traveled roads, clearly following a predetermined escape route. James's training kicked in as he noted street names and landmarks, mentally mapping their route. Through his windshield, he could see the van's tinted windows, knowing somewhere behind that dark glass were two terrified girls. The same girls who had shown kindness to his son when they had every reason to be bitter. The same girls whose car he had vandalized just days ago. The irony wasn't lost on him as he reached for his phone, keeping one eye firmly on the van ahead. He pressed the speed dial for Judge Thompson's office, his heart hammering against his chest. Judge Thompson speaking. "Sir, this is Officer James Mitchell," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Your daughters. They've been kidnapped outside their school. I'm following the van right now." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What? Where are you?" "We're heading east on Madison Street, approaching the industrial district. Black van, tinted windows, license plate starts with XRK. They're moving fast, but I'm staying with them." "I'm alerting all units now," Thompson replied, his voice shifting into action mode. "Stay on the line, Mitchell." "Don't lose that van." James could hear Thompson barking orders in the background, the sound of phones ringing and voices rising in urgency. The judge was mobilizing every available officer in the area. "They're turning onto Warehouse Row," James reported, watching the van navigate through the nearly empty streets of the industrial zone. "Lots of abandoned buildings here. Perfect place to disappear. All units are converging on your location," Thompson responded. "We've got cars blocking all exit routes from the industrial district. Whatever you do, don't lose them." The van suddenly accelerated as if the kidnappers had spotted something in their rear-view mirror. James pressed harder on the gas, maintaining his distance while trying not to look too obvious about following them. "Sir," James said, his voice lower now, "I know I'm the last person you'd want helping your daughters right now, but I swear I'll do everything I can to keep them safe." There was a brief pause on the line before Thompson replied, "Just help bring my girls home, Mitchell. That's all that matters right now." The sound of distant sirens began to fill the air, and James could see flashing lights reflecting off the buildings ahead. The trap was being set, with police units moving to seal off every possible escape route. "They're about to hit the roadblock on Mason Street," James reported, watching as the van's brake lights suddenly flared red. "They've spotted the police units. They're turning around." The van executed a sharp U-turn, tires screeching on the pavement. James had to swerve to avoid being spotted as the vehicle rushed past him in the opposite direction. He quickly turned his car around to resume the pursuit. "They're heading back toward Carter Avenue," he told Thompson. "They're boxed in now, units behind them, units ahead. We've got them." The sound of sirens grew louder as police cars converged from all directions, the net tightening around the kidnappers' van. James's heart pounded as he realized this nightmare might soon be over, hoping against hope that the twins were unharmed inside that van. "All units in position," Thompson's voice came through the phone, tight with controlled tension. "We're ready to move in. Police cars swarmed around the black van, their sirens wailing and lights flashing in a dizzying display of red and blue. Officers emerged from their vehicles with weapons drawn, surrounding the kidnappers' van in a tight circle of authority and firepower. "Come out with your hands up!" an officer commanded through a megaphone, his voice echoing off the warehouse walls. After tense moments, the van's door slowly opened. Two men emerged with their hands raised, immediately being forced to the ground and handcuffed. Officers rushed to the back of the van, finding Ashley and Amber huddled together, scared but unharmed. The screech of tires announced Judge Thompson's arrival. He burst from his car before it had fully stopped, running toward his daughters as officers helped them out of the van. His face was etched with worry and relief as he wrapped both girls in a tight embrace. "My girls," he whispered, holding them close. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "We're fine, Dad," Ashley assured him, her voice shaky but strong. "Just scared," Amber added, clinging to her father. Thompson looked up, his eyes finding James standing awkwardly to the side. The judge's expression softened as he released his daughters and approached the officer. "Mitchell," Thompson said, extending his hand. "Thank you. If you hadn't been there." James accepted the handshake stiffly, guilt churning in his stomach. "Just doing my job, sir." "No, this was more than that," Thompson insisted. "You've really changed these past months. Getting over your prejudices, seeing people for who they really are. It shows real growth." James shifted uncomfortably, thinking about the slashed tires and hateful messages he'd left on the girl's car just days ago. The plans he'd been making for worse acts of revenge felt like poison in his mind. The twins stood beside their father, looking at James with a mixture of gratitude and lingering wariness. They had no idea that their rescuer was also their tormentor. The weight of his recent actions pressed down on him like a physical burden. As he watched the Thompson family walk away, James realized something profound had shifted inside him. The hatred that had driven him for so long suddenly felt hollow, meaningless in the face of such grace and dignity. He had a lot of making right to do. The next morning, James Mitchell stood outside Judge Thompson's office for the second time in 6 months. This time, he wasn't here to receive punishment. He was here to confess. His hand trembled as he knocked on the heavy wooden door. Inside, he found not just the judge, but Ashley and Amber as well, all three looking at him with curiosity. "Officer Mitchell," Judge Thompson gestured to a chair. "What brings you here today?" James remained standing, his police cap clutched in his hands. "Sir, girls, I need to tell you something." He took a deep breath. "The vandalism to your car last week, the slashed tires, the hateful messages, that was me." The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Thompson's expression hardened, while the twins exchanged one of their characteristic glances. "I know," Ashley said quietly. James's head snapped up. "What?" "We have security cameras in the parking lot," Amber explained. "We saw everything." "But you didn't report it." "We wanted to see what you would do next," Ashley said, her voice calm and measured. "Whether hate would consume you completely, or if there was still hope for change." James felt his legs go weak. He sank into the chair, overwhelmed by their wisdom and restraint. "Yesterday, when I followed that van, I was only there because I was planning something worse. I was watching you, waiting to—" His voice cracked. "I was so wrong. About everything." Judge Thompson leaned forward, his fingers steepled under his chin. "What changed?" "My son," James said softly. "He told me how you helped him with the bullies. And then yesterday, seeing your courage, your dignity, even in the face of real danger." He looked at the twins. "I've spent months blaming you for my punishment, never once considering that I was the one who needed to change." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his badge, placing it on the judge's desk. "I don't deserve to wear this. Not after what I've done." Judge Thompson picked up the badge, studying it thoughtfully. "6 months ago, I sent you to Riverside because I believed in the possibility of redemption. Yesterday, you proved that belief wasn't misplaced. Today, you're proving it again." He held the badge out to James. "Keep it. Show others the same path to change." "But, sir, the vandalism—" "Will be handled through community service," the judge finished. "You'll spend your weekends for the next year mentoring at-risk youth at the Riverside Community Center. Show them there's a better way." 2 weeks later, James stood before a group of teenagers at the community center, feeling more nervous than he'd ever been on police duty. Among them was Marcus, a young black teen who reminded him painfully of himself at that age. Angry, defensive, full of misplaced prejudices. "Why should we listen to you?" Marcus challenged. "You're just another cop who thinks he knows everything." James met the boy's gaze steadily. "No, I'm someone who learned the hard way that hate only destroys the person holding it." He shared his story, all of it, the arrest, the punishment, the revenge, and finally, the redemption. "But the hardest part," he concluded, "wasn't admitting I was wrong to others. It was admitting it to myself." After the session, he found Ashley and Amber waiting outside. They'd been volunteering at the center long before his arrival, another fact he'd never bothered to learn during his months of hatred. "That was brave," Ashley said, "sharing your story like that." "The kids needed to hear it," Amber added, "especially Marcus." James nodded, thinking of the young man's hostile expression. "I recognized that anger. I lived with it for so long." "Change takes time," Ashley smiled. "We'll help." Over the following months, James watched Marcus slowly transform, just as he had. The boy's anger gave way to understanding, his defensiveness to curiosity. Together, they created a program bringing police officers and community youth together for regular dialogue sessions. One evening, as James drove home from the center, he spotted his old partner, David, pulling someone over. The scene was painfully familiar, a young black man in a nice car being treated with obvious suspicion. James pulled over and stepped out of his car. "Everything okay here, David?" His former partner straightened up. "Just a routine stop, Mitchell." "Guy was driving a car too nice for this neighborhood, if you know what I mean." "No," James said firmly. "I don't know what you mean." He turned to the young man. "Sir, are you Marcus Thompson from Carter and Associates?" The man nodded, relief flooding his face. "Yes, I'm on my way home from the office." "He's one of the top corporate lawyers in the city, David," James explained. "And this is his neighborhood." He met his old partner's gaze. "The only thing suspicious here is why you made this stop." David flushed red. "Since when did you become such a bleeding heart?" "Since I learned to see people instead of prejudices," James replied. "You should try it sometime." Later that night, as James helped Peter with his homework, his son looked up with a smile. "Dad, guess what? Ashley and Amber are starting a tutoring program at school. They asked if I'd help." James felt warmth spread through his chest. "That's wonderful, buddy. They're pretty amazing people, aren't they?" "Yeah," Peter grinned. "And you know what else is amazing? Watching my dad become a hero." James pulled his son close, thinking about how far they'd both come. The real heroes, son, are the people who show us grace when we least deserve it, who give us the chance to become better than we are. He thought about the Thompson twins, about Marcus, about all the lives touched by ripples of change. One act of prejudice had set him on this path, but thousands of acts of kindness had shown him the way forward. The morning sun streamed through his kitchen window as James prepared for another day. His badge caught the light, gleaming with renewed purpose. It was no longer just a symbol of authority, but a reminder of transformation, of second chances, and of the endless possibility of change. He had learned that true strength lies not in power or pride, but in the courage to admit when we're wrong and the willingness to grow. And that lesson, he knew, was worth every difficult step of the journey. A racist cop who once terrorized two innocent black teens is now teaching others about acceptance and change. His incredible transformation shows it's never too late to open your heart. The twins he once targeted are now helping him build bridges in the community. This emotional story proves that hatred can turn to hope when we choose to grow. Thank you for taking time to witness this story with us. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Every story we share is meant to move and transform. If you found inspiration in today's tale, simply leave a 9 below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Until our next story unfolds,